Misconception number 21. Mario's full name is Mario Mario. This one comes from the live-action film and is assumed by many due to the fact that the series is called Super Mario Bros. However, naming conventions are different in Japan, and Mario Brothers doesn't necessarily mean that the last name is Mario, and according to Nintendo, Mario doesn't actually have a last name. Misconception number 22. The biggest video game world is found in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas or some other modern sandbox game. The largest in-world game belongs to none other than The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall for PC, with a game world that is twice the size of the United Kingdom, over 302,000 square miles, with over 15,000 places to visit, such as towns, castles, and dungeons, and over 750,000 NPCs. Most of the overworld was randomly generated by the game's engine, and its sequel, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, was 0.01% the size at around 10 square miles. The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion had 16 square miles, and The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim also being around 16 square miles. The first Elder Scrolls game featured an unlimited overworld, as you could keep walking forever, and the game would continue to generate random terrain. Fast travel was the only way to travel to cities. Daggerfall, however, is the biggest game world with a defined map, which is said to take 2 weeks of real time to walk across. Misconception number 23. Glitches are always bad. Funny thing that, a lot of times glitches become beloved gameplay features, and in some ways become the basis of entire games. In Space Invaders, the aliens speed up as more of them die. This isn't due to increasing difficulty, but as less sprites are on the screen, the game becomes less and less affected by slowdown. It's said that if not for the slowdown, Space Invaders would have been brutally difficult and not very fun. Another famous example is Devil May Cry, which actually started as a Resident Evil game. The juggling mechanic of shooting or slicing at an enemy to keep them in the air was a glitch early on, but added so much to the game that it became a totally new experience and became an original IP. Misconception number 24. Super Mario Bros. Is the best-selling game of all time. This is not so much false as it is outdated. Super Mario Bros. Used to be the top-selling game of all time, with over 40 million copies sold. However, it was surpassed by Wii Sports, which has sold over 76 million copies. No other console game has surpassed Super Mario Bros. The best-selling PC game is The Sims, with 16 million units sold, and the best-selling mobile game is Tetris, which is said to be on over 100 million phones. Misconception number 25. Insert console here is the highest-selling console of its generation. There are too many of these misconceptions to do them separately, so I'll handle it all here. We're currently transitioning into the 8th generation of games, so I'll quickly let you know the top-selling consoles for the first 7. For the first generation, the Odyssey was number 1 with 2 million units sold. In the second generation, the Atari 2600 was the winner with 30 million sold. In Generation 3, it was the NES, which sold over 49 million. Generation 4's winner was not the Super NES as you'd expect, but rather the humble Game Boy. It's hard to find an exact sales figure, as sales figures oddly seem to be combined with the Game Boy Color, but it amounts to around 118 million. Even if half of that is the Game Boy Color, it would still be more than the Super NES, which sold 49 million units. The PlayStation wins Generation 5 with over 102 million units sold. Generation 6 houses the best-selling console of all time, the PlayStation 2, with over 153 million units sold. The current 7th generation has the second highest-selling console, the DS, which has sold 149 million units to date, beating out the Wii, which has sold 89 million units. Which is why it really cracks me up when people say Nintendo is doing poorly. Misconception number 26. Nintendo has never had a commercial failure. As I mentioned in the last bit, Nintendo has overall had the best luck with game consoles, though Sony is certainly no slouch. But they've had their share of commercial failures. The often forgotten Virtual Boy system did so poorly that its designer, Gunpei Yokoi, was forced to resign from Nintendo, where he got another job at Bandai and designed yet another failed handheld, the WonderSwan. Now, before you go thinking the guy was terrible, he did design the original Game Boy and was the creator of both Metroid and Kid Icarus. Nintendo's only other commercial failure was the Nintendo 64 DD, an add-on for the Nintendo 64 that used writable magnetic discs. Sound familiar? Yeah, it's almost the same technology from their Famicom disk system back in the 80s. It was so poorly anticipated that Nintendo didn't even release it to stores, instead being only sold through a subscription service, and it was never released outside of Japan. Misconception number 27. Poor-selling games are of low quality. If a game didn't sell well, it could be for any number of reasons, including it being a piece of shit. But we know that piece-of-shit games can sell really well, like E.T. on the Atari, so it stands to reason that good games can sell poorly. I looked through Wikipedia's list of commercial failures in video games and found several decent titles in there, such as Brutal Legend, a quirky RTS for the 360 and PlayStation 3, Grim Fandango, an underrated and obscure classic PC game, Mad World, a fun and insane brawler for the Wii, and Okami, a critical darling and artistically beautiful game for PlayStation 2 and Wii. All of these games are great and are worth finding, and luckily, as they didn't sell well, you can probably find them very cheap. Misconception number 28. The mysterious Project X console that was marketed in 1999 became the Xbox. I can see how you'd think that. After all, Project X, Xbox. But actually, they're unrelated. The X in Xbox comes from DirectX, as the console was originally created to showcase DirectX technology. Project X was never a name for a console, but rather a working name for a console that became a DVD player that happened to play some games. Only 4 movies were ever released that took advantage of the Nuon technology, and 8 games were made for it, one of which didn't work at all, 2 of which would only work with certain models of the system, and 1 was only released in Korea. The console, the Nuon, is completely forgettable, even down to its controller, which was made by Logitech and was nothing more than a slightly modified version of their Nintendo 64 controllers. A far cry from the Xbox. Misconception number 29. The Xbox 360 has a failure rate of over 54%. Once again, this isn't so much false as it is out of date. There was a time when a shocking amount of Xbox 360 consoles failed, and the 54% number cropped up a lot, mostly in the form of Sony and Nintendo crowing about it. However, while the number may have once been accurate, the 360 has gone through revisions and is now much less prone to failure, with the overall failure rate standing at about 23.7% in 2010, and that's still counting all the early consoles that failed. It's 2 years later, and though I don't have the exact percentage now, it's definitely even lower. Misconception number 30. M-rated games sell better than any other ESRB rating. Actually, remember when I said that the top 2 best-selling games of all time are Wii Sports and Super Mario Bros.? After that would be Pokemon, Tetris, and then Duck Hunt. Obviously, the older games aren't ESRB rated, but games that appeal to everyone sell to everyone, with E and E10 Plus rated games taking up around 54% of total game sales. T-rated games take up about 28%, and M-rated games only around 15%. As for those AO-rated games, well, the rating is so rarely given out that they barely register, as most developers who get the AO rating will tone down their game and resubmit for an M rating, especially since stores such as Walmart and GameStop will not sell AO rated games.